The Child from Nowhere, Nuremberg, Germany, May 1828. Amidst the sweltering heat, passers-by suddenly stopped in their tracks at the sight of a figure staggering through the town square. It was a teenager, about 16 years old, but his eyes were as blank as a sheet of white paper. He knew neither who he was nor where he came from. In his hand, he clutched a mysterious letter, and his lips incessantly muttered a single sentence like a broken machine. "I want to be a cavalryman, as my father was." He did not know how to use a spoon, he feared sunlight, and his body exhaled the scent of years spent imprisoned in darkness. How could a human exist without a past? Was this a miracle? Kaspar Hauser, the name given to this strange youth, quickly became the center of the wildest theories. Many believed he was a feral child, raised in a dark cellar for 16 years. But there was a theory even more chilling and captivating. Kaspar Hauser was the switched prince of the House of Baden, a victim of a cruel political conspiracy to strip him of his inheritance, turning a future monarch into a ghost in the shadows. For nearly 2 centuries, the story of the stolen prince became an immortal legend, a painful scar in German royal history. In 1833, Kaspar was mysteriously assassinated by a knife wound to the chest. The secret of his identity seemed destined to stay buried in his grave. That was until 1998, when the first DNA tests threw cold water on the legend. However, the technology at the time was rudimentary, and the blood samples on Kaspar's old vest were suspected of contamination. Royalists clung to the last shred of hope. Then came 2024. The most modern gene sequencing machines, powers capable of reading the biological diary from the fragments of time, spoke up. And the answer from the laboratory ruthlessly tore down the velvet curtain of the House of Baden. Imagine your DNA as a unique identification code, like an ID number etched into every cell. Scientists extracted mitochondrial DNA, a signature passed only from mother to child, from Kaspar's remaining hair and blood samples. The results, published in prestigious scientific journals like PubMed, confirmed Kaspar Hauser's DNA did not match the members of the House of Baden. The discrepancy was so vast that the prince theory was completely debunked. It is like finding an ancient key and believing it opens the castle's treasure chest, only to find it isn't even the right size for the lock. Kaspar did not possess blue blood. He was not the victim of a struggle for the throne. So, who was Kaspar Hauser really? A genius imposter who fooled an entire continent with masterclass acting? Or simply a poor, abandoned child turned into a tool for the masses' fantasies? Science has decoded who Kaspar Hauser was not, but it leaves behind a more painful question. Who was he, truly? After the royal luster is stripped away, we are left only with the image of a tragic young man who died in solitude, used by the world to weave royal dreams. Kaspar Hauser is a testament to the fact that sometimes humans would rather believe a magnificent lie than accept a cold, empty truth. Which would you choose? A beautiful falsehood or a cold truth under a microscope? The answer lies in how you perceive the world. The Gage Enigma. What if one day you looked in the mirror and saw the same familiar face, but the person standing there was a total stranger? Have you ever wondered, where does the line between an exemplary citizen and a sinner lie within our bodies? Is your kindness a choice of the soul, or merely a fragile circuit in the brain? In 1848, a horrific explosion propelled a 6-kilogram iron rod through the skull of Phineas Gage. By all laws of survival, he should have died instantly, but he didn't. Phineas not only survived, but stood up and spoke as if he had just woken from a brief nightmare. At that time, the world believed the brain was a unified mass, and the soul was something supernatural, beyond the control of matter. Phineas Gage was the embodiment of perfection, a model railroad foreman, calm and respected. In the eyes of 19th century society, if the brain was damaged, you either died or lost your memory. No one could imagine that inside that hard skull lay intricate circuits that defined who you are. But as the external scars faded, a terrifying truth emerged. The Phineas Gage everyone knew had died, even though his heart kept beating. The once polite gentleman turned into a rude, vulgar man who acted entirely on instinct. He lost the ability to plan, could not control his anger, and became a stranger to his own family. His friends bitterly remarked, Gage was no longer Gage. That iron rod hadn't just pierced flesh and bone. It had severed the link between the animal and the human within him. Imagine your brain as a high-end office building. That 1-meter iron rod pierced through the top floor, the executive suite where the CEO sits, otherwise known as the prefrontal cortex. According to studies from PubMed and modern simulation data, this is the area that controls impulses and regulates social behavior. It is like the brakes of an F1 race car. When the iron rod swept through, it didn't destroy the engine, motor skills, or language, but it completely blew out the braking system. Gage could still think and work, but he no longer had the capacity to judge right from wrong. This event forced medicine to acknowledge a shocking truth. Personality is not a floating soul. It is the result of physical interactions within the frontal lobe. Gage's accident was the first shot that gave birth to modern neuroscience. Phineas Gage passed away in 1860 following severe seizures, but the question he left behind echoes to this day. If a small physical impact can turn an angel into a demon, are we truly masters of our own behavior? The Gimli Glider. Imagine you are at 12,500 meters, where the air is so thin your lungs would burst without the plane's protective shell. Suddenly, a thump sounds. Not an explosion, not a roar, but an absolute silence. The familiar hum of the jet engines dies out, replaced by the whistling of wind through the door seams, like the sigh of the Grim Reaper. You look out the window. The massive fans of the Boeing 767 have stopped spinning. At this moment, a chilling question arises. How do you bring 132 tons of steel, the equivalent of a 5-story building hurtling at near-sonic speeds, safely to the ground when there isn't a single drop of fuel left in the tank? In the 80s, the Boeing 767 was considered a technological marvel, the safest flying fortress in the world. It was believed that with sophisticated computer systems, running out of fuel mid-flight was unthinkable, like an ocean suddenly drying up overnight. Pilots of that era began to place total trust in digital sensors. Flying across the Canadian sky was merely a boring administrative procedure, a journey from point A to point B, pre-programmed by superior electronic brains. But this is where reality crushed all faith. The entire multi-million-dollar security system was defeated by an elementary school math error. Canada was transitioning to the metric system. A technician confused pounds with kilograms. Instead of loading 22,000 kilograms of fuel, they only loaded 22,000 pounds, less than half of what was required. High in the blue sky at 12,500 meters, the warning chime rang out like the scream of a wounded beast. Engine number 1 died. Then engine number 2 stopped breathing. The Boeing 767, the Ferrari of the skies, had officially become a 100-ton rock in freefall. Imagine trying to control this plane as being like driving a bus with no brakes and a dead engine, careening down an icy mountain road. When the engines died, the digital screens went pitch black. The only thing that saved them was a tiny fan that deployed from the belly of the plane, the ram air turbine, spinning in the wind to generate just enough power for the mechanical gauges. Captain Robert Pearson, an experienced glider pilot, made a daring decision to land at Gimli, an old military base that had been converted into a racetrack. To visualize the difficulty, it was like throwing a dart from the top of a skyscraper and requiring it to hit a postage stamp on the ground while the wind is howling. Because the plane was too high and too fast, Pearson executed a forward slip, tilting the massive aircraft sharply to one side to create drag, a maneuver usually reserved for small wooden planes. Passengers looked out the window and saw the ground rushing toward them vertically. The air pressure grinding against the metal hull sounded like the cracking of human bones. The plane slammed onto the runway, its nose grinding against the pavement, creating a rain of fire hundreds of meters long. A miracle occurred. Not a single life was lost. The plane was later nicknamed the Gimli Glider, but this story leaves a bone-chilling lesson about our dependence on technology. In a world where we entrust our lives to algorithms and automated systems, do we still retain the manual skills to save ourselves when the machines go on strike? The memory thief. Are you certain that what you remember is the truth? Try searching your mind for a childhood memory. You see the color of the shirt you wore, hear the laughter of loved ones, perhaps even smell the dry grass of that afternoon. But what if I told you that event never existed? Are you living in a movie edited from fraudulent fragments? For centuries, we believed the brain was a perfect film camera. Every event, every face was stored on a biological hard drive. In courtrooms, eyewitness testimony is considered the crown of justice. If a person places their hand on the Bible and swears they saw it with their own eyes, how can we doubt them? We believe memory is immutable, the only anchor keeping our identity from drifting away in the river of time. But this is when the foundation of that confidence collapses. Dr. Elizabeth Loftus stepped into the lab and made a statement that rocked the scientific world. Your memory is more vulnerable to intrusion and alteration than a text file without a password. She proved that memory is not something we retrieve, but something we reconstruct every time we recall it. With just a few subtle suggestive words, she can plant a psychological virus in your head, making you believe in crimes you never witnessed or traumas you never experienced. Look at the terrifying power of words through Loftus's classic 1974 experiment. She showed volunteers a film of a car accident. To the first group, she asked, how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other? To the second group, she used a gentler word, hit. The result? Just a week later, those who heard the word smashed swore they saw shattered glass on the ground, even though there was no glass in the actual film. A single word had hijacked and rewritten the data in their brains. Going further, Loftus performed the lost in the mall technique. She convinced participants they had been lost as children and rescued by a stranger. 25% of them not only believed this fake story, but began to weave incredibly vivid emotional details about the event. False memory is not just a small error, it is a living entity. It has color, it has emotion, and it takes root in your brain like a parasite, making it impossible for you to distinguish between truth and a product of suggestion. Her work has forced thousands of cases to be reopened, exonerating those wrongly convicted based on witnesses with faulty memories. If memory can be molded like clay, the final question remains: who are you, really? Are we a collection of naked truths, or just a gallery of sweet lies that the brain weaves to survive? The Speaking Hands. You walk into a bustling tavern in the mid-19th century. The room is filled with laughter, heated debates, and the haggling of goods. But one thing sends a shiver down your spine. Absolutely no sound comes from their mouths. Dozens of people are constantly dancing their hands, their eyes burning with intelligence, their fingers intertwining to create a dance of words. Even those with perfect hearing do not bother to speak. They choose to communicate through complex signs under the dim candlelight. Is this a secret cult? In our consciousness, congenital deafness is often seen as a void. It is a glass wall separating an individual from the rest of society. For thousands of years, history viewed the deaf as people needing help, or as being isolated in their own silent world. Spoken language was the measure of normalcy, and anyone outside that rule was considered a flawed piece of creation. We defaulted to the idea that to integrate, the one who cannot hear must learn the ways of the one who can. But at Martha's Vineyard, an isolated island off the coast of Massachusetts, USA, that rule was crushed. For over 250 years, from the 1640s until the early 20th century, this island created an astonishing parallel reality. Here, the deaf were not isolated. On the contrary, it was the hearing people who had to integrate into the world of signs. A shocking truth was unveiled. On this island, sign language was not a support tool, it was the mother tongue of the entire community. The barrier between sound and silence was completely obliterated, turning this place into a unique utopia in human history. Why could a small island change the very nature of human communication? The answer lies in the toolbox of genetics. By the late 19th century, the rate of deafness in the US was 1 in nearly 6,000. But at Martha's Vineyard, it was 1 in 155. In the town of Chilmark, it soared to a staggering 1 in 4. To put it simply, imagine a classroom of 20 students. In the outside world, you'd have to go through 300 schools to find one deaf student. But in Chilmark, at every table of 4, one person couldn't hear. The cause was a recessive gene from early settlers from Kent, England. Because the island was isolated like a biological fortress in the ocean, this gene pool repeated and spread across generations. The result was the birth of Martha's Vineyard Sign Language, MVSL. It permeated every fiber of life. Fishermen signed to each other amidst roaring waves where voices were useless. Clergy signed sermons from the pulpit. Even hearing people sign to each other in church to maintain solemnity or across vast fields from great distances. Communication here was as precious as diamonds but as common as air. No one viewed deafness as a tragedy. It was simply an identifying trait, like having blue eyes or brown hair. Today, Martha's Vineyard Sign Language has vanished as the island opened up and new blood flowed in. But its story leaves a poignant question. Is disability truly in the human body, or in the rigidity of the surrounding environment. When an entire community is willing to learn a new language so that no one is left behind, disability disappears. Martha's Vineyard was not just a strange village. It is a mirror reflecting the cruelty of the modern world, where we have all the technology to hear one another, yet frequently refuse to understand the language of others. Treasure in the crevice. You are standing before a door leading to humanity's greatest secret, but the door is exactly 18 centimeters wide. It is narrower than the width of a tablet, thinner than the cereal box you eat from every morning. Beyond that rock crevice lies a fossil treasure that could rip apart every history textbook you've ever studied. But you, a world-renowned scientist, are too large to fit through. Will you stand by and watch history slip away through a narrow crack, or will you gamble the lives of others to enter this 1,000-year-old tomb? We often think of archaeology as a game for brawny men in Indiana Jones hats, using shovels and sledgehammers to unearth giant bones. Conventionally, great discoveries require grand expeditions, tons of heavy equipment, and people with extraordinary physical strength to withstand desert winds. We believe that the greater the intellect and muscle, the higher the achievement. But in 2013, at the Rising Star Cave System in South Africa, those rules were pulverized. Archaeologist Lee Berger knew for certain that something priceless lay at the bottom of that deep cave. But between him and the truth was a bottleneck called the chute. This is a jagged vertical rock chimney where a single breath in the wrong direction could leave your chest permanently wedged between ancient stones. The greatest truth of the 21st century was being blockaded by a ridiculous physical barrier, the human body. Lee Berger, with his average adult build, was completely helpless. Berger made a crazy move. He posted a recruitment ad on Facebook for underground astronauts. The requirements couldn't have been weirder. You had to have a PhD, extreme courage, and most importantly, be slender enough to wriggle through that 18-centimeter hole. 6 brave women were chosen. They were not just scientists, they were adrenaline-fueled warriors. Imagine crawling 30 meters underground, surrounded by darkness thick as asphalt, air smelling of stone dust, and the biting chill of a crypt. In the naledi chamber, they found a biological gold mine, over 1,500 fossil fragments. To put this into perspective, this number is so large it accounts for 1/3 of the entire hominin fossil record ever found. It was like accidentally finding a diamond-encrusted Ferrari in an abandoned junkyard. This was Homo naledi, a completely new ancient human species. They had brains only the size of an orange, but their hands were built remarkably like ours. More astonishingly, data suggests they may have performed burial rituals, a behavior we once thought belonged only to modern humans. The entire map of human evolution was completely overturned by bones lying deep under a narrow crevice that no brawny man could ever reach. It turns out that to understand the greatest things about our origins, we must sometimes learn to become the smallest. History is not always found in towering pyramids or magnificent cities. Sometimes it hides in the cracks of the earth, where only those who dare to abandon their giant ego and face the fear of being buried can reach it. Have you ever wondered how many more great truths lie right beneath your feet, waiting for someone small enough and brave enough to crawl into the darkness and bring them into the light? The world is still full of hidden truths and stories that defy belief. If you're ready to uncover more of the most incredible and disturbing mysteries of our history, subscribe to Oddplain. Don't let the next story pass you by. Join us, and let's explore the unknown together. Thank you for watching, and stay curious. Goodbye.